Hello there guys and welcome back to the channel. So finally we are going to be coming up with the rant of 2019. We're going to be taking a look at most of the important influential things that happened in 2019 and basically we're going to be characterizing them as a wins or losses. So we're going to be taking a look at the win column of MCOC of 2019 and then we're going to be definitely inevitably taking a look at much larger, definitely severely more packed loss and fail column of 2019. So all in all, definitely we have to say that the game has changed completely in the last year. We have all of the Act 6 chapters that have been coming out throughout the year that have transformed the face and the necessities of an endgame, absolutely. But at the same time, we have had a lot of different changes in the content that are definitely worth talking about. However, before we do start criticizing Marvel Concept Champions team too much at Kabam over there, we definitely have to give away a few wins for them and appreciate some of the great things that have happened. And number one, that would be champion design. I think champion design team is absolutely on fire when it comes A, to designing the animations, B, to designing interesting and valid champions. And realistically, when you look at the 25 champions that are released this year, only 2 are absolutely garbage, which is Diablo and Ebdimo. I do not know what were they thinking at any given point. They are complete dumpster fires of a champions, and it really feels as if I don't know, somebody lost a bit of their sanity before releasing them, butchering them. I don't know exactly what happened there, but they could definitely be characterized as the biggest failed champions of 2019. Additionally, we have champions like Annihilus and Mr. Sinister, which do not really serve much more of a purpose than pissing off people when placed in alliance or defense, or when you're facing off against them in a quest, which you can kind of understand that there is a need for those. At the same time, they could have definitely balanced them much better. For instance, perfect example for a champion like that is Domino. Domino is a pain in the ass and arguably the worst champion to fight against, at least for me personally. I absolutely hate it, but at the same time she has great offensive potential and is one of the best attacking champions in the game. So just because you want to make a pain in the ass character to fight up against doesn't mean they necessarily have to suck offensively, and unfortunately Mr. Sinister and Annihilus kind of do. But that being said, all in all, remaining 21 champions that came out this year would definitely be considered, let's say, god tier or beyond god tier if they were released at some point in 2017, let's say. So the game design definitely has been moving on forwards and upwards, and I think that is also largely the department that keeps this game running, that keeps us interested. Because the champions are fascinating. We're all Marvel fans. We all want to see our favorite Marvel comic book heroes come to this game, destroy opponents, and just play with them. And they are keeping this idea, this dream for us alive. And they are definitely the team that's behind the continued success of Marvel Concept Champions, in my personal opinion anyways. But that being said, yes, champions have been fantastic. We have gotten, I think, most kind of like quote-unquote god tier or whatever champions this year than ever before, and so many of them have completely transformed the game. Okay, so champions, definite win all in all, with a couple of dumpster fire fails in the middle, but we can forgive them because they are overall consistently good. Another huge plus coming in 2019 was when we go to the quest tab, we have received more and more of variant difficulty quests. So the first variant actually came out in 2019 towards the end of it, and it's also by far the hardest one and the most punishing. The last 3 variants that were all added in 2019 have been absolutely phenomenally fun pieces of content, exactly what the game needed, providing fairly easy access to endgame material rewards, taking up champions rank 5, some tier 5Bs, 5-star awakening gems. Those were kind of like the top end products that we were able to acquire thanks to these variants, and they felt incredibly fun. I think each of them is unique, each of them delivered kind of like different need for different champions, so we got to play with different parts of our rosters. Obviously there were some of the champions that kind of performed unanimously well throughout, but all in all we could definitely see that the needs for different champions were met there. There were different requirements, different bonuses, different penalties, and the contents in themselves, outside of maybe kind of like a couple of fights, definitely felt kind of like fun, engaging, challenging, and I think they are probably the most well received piece of content in my Concierge Champions this year, because they definitely did what they were meant to do, did what they were designed to do, and they took a turn for the better from Variant 1, because Variant 1 was far more difficult than the 3 that came after it, and it was also far more longer. Variant 2, we could see that the number of paths were shortened down, it wasn't as long as Variant 1, and Variant 3 and 4 even had the quest length cut down, so it definitely didn't feel like a grind, it didn't feel like this massive kind of like cash grabby event which you can have to complete to get the resources. It was something you were excited and eager to jump into and have a bit of fun, especially the last one. The last one, if we would escape the whole 1-star controversy, which we're going to talk about later, would have arguably been pretty much the best piece of content. It probably still is, in fact, best piece of content in 2019 for most, aside if you don't really have 1-star champions and then you are kind of shafted, and yeah, that's a different story. We're gonna get there. This is not gonna be the shortest video, guys. Yeah, so that is the second big win for Kabam in 2019, which is all 3 of the variants. Now, another thing that might be a bit smaller win, but still counts as a win, man. It definitely counts as a win, and that was uncollected Thanos boss fight, an otherwise horrible celebration of Avengers Endgame. Now we're going to talk about Thanos. Now for a change I can bring up Thanos. Obviously it's not the same one that I'm talking about, but you guys remember Avengers Endgame, that a really horrible boring month that we had to endure, and during that month, however, they released uncollected event quest, as they always do, and there was this Thanos boss that was a single boss for the entire last quest in the final chapter, and basically you had to spend 9 energy to get to him, and that was an incredible fun fight. Now, and that fight was arguably the most masterful piece of in-game fighting that I had seen them design ever. Now, there are arguments made that it should not have been an uncollected event. I still feel it would have performed a lot better if it would have been a separate event in itself and we had gotten whatever else as an uncollected boss, because people definitely were tested and many people got frustrated with the fact that they were not able to explore uncollected event difficulty because they were not able to get past this fight. However, again, the counter argument to that is, and this might be a bit harmless from me, big fat fucking doo-doo. This fight was not roster demanding. You could practice as much as you could, and if you did not defeat it, then you suck. I'm sorry, I don't mean you suck, but you did not put enough work, because it was easy to practice for it, and it was definitely doable with 4 stars even, and yeah, it did not have any specific roster requirements, so it was a fight that was more skill intensive that people are used to in uncollected difficulty. I can definitely agree to that, but it definitely was not cheap and underhanded. In my opinion, it was the most fantastic piece of designed kind of like fight I had seen in a really long time in this game, because it did kind of demand certain specific qualities. At the same time, they left them fairly vague. Section 1 was preferably you have power gains. Section 2, preferably you have damage over time effects. Section 3, you are Avenger or can tank level 3s or something of the sort. But at the same time, you could use all 5 champions to construct the team and are able to tackle it. Additionally, even if you did not have, let's say, damage over time effect, you could still get through the section 2 if you played well. And this was a fight that emphasized the skill over money, revives, or roster, or anything else. When this fight was active in the contest, I believe I uploaded probably like 10 different solos of this guy using, I don't know, Massacre, Carnage, Omega Red, Thor Ragnarok, Captain America Infinity War, Hyperion Blades. There were many different answers for this guy, but you had to put in some time, you had to practice, and you had to kind of like perform yourself rather than your roster, and that is why I loved it. I don't think we have had anything close to as good of a fight anytime recently when it comes to like actual skill requirement opposed to roster demanding piece of it. So yes, Thanos still brings a smile to my face, kind of remembering some of the frustrations, some of the learning curves, and just overall the whole experience is definitely positive. Absolutely loved it. Wish they would do more fights of the similar or even the same. Man, I would love them bring it back with small variations. I think it's fantastic. I think it's complete opposite to 6.26 champion, which is insanely bitch of a fight. which we're gonna get to later. Again, this is not gonna be the quickest video. So we have the big 3 wins of this year, and those are the 3 biggest wins I think that we have. Unfortunately, there are some things that could be scored on either way, but other than that, this year has been relatively disappointing, and we're gonna talk about the biggest disappointments of the year. The biggest disappointment of the year for a casual, regular, day-to-day Marvel Concept Champions player, in my opinion, has been event quests. Now this year we have had the side event quest every month. So if we had uncollected event quest, we had something else going on side, and all of them kind of sucked. There was not a single kind of like new idea, as far as I know, or new idea that worked out well either way. All of them were rehashes of previous year's rifts, or some scrapyards, or some Gwenpool's Go to the Movies, and arguably much worse versions like MCOC slabs. It almost seems that Kabam has magically run out of ideas or ability to produce any new ideas or courage to implement something new. I don't know what's going on over there, but somebody is clearly blowing off this whole Marvel Concept Champions game and simply not doing anything to entertain us, or maybe they're too scared to ruin the economy, or I don't know what it is. There has been a serious shift in new interesting additions provided to the game, and throughout the entire year you could argue that practically nothing actually new got added in the game aside from the champions, because all of the side event quests were rehash of previous years. Rifts, MCOC slabs, Gwenpool Goes to the Movies, what have you, so on and so forth. There was nothing new invented. All of these progression-based upgrade calendars, they were upgraded, but they were copy-paste each from another, from what we used to have, and 1 or 2 items changed. They were not actually changed radically, so that was literally just cookie cutting, or whatever else you can call copy-paste. Change 2 things, bang, that's a new progression calendar. That was underwhelming. All of our holiday calendars were again clearly copy-paste from last year's calendar, improve it slightly bit, leave it the same. There was no new idea behind any of them. There was no new calendar. In addition, this year we did not have Halloween calendar for whatever reason, and it just felt like somebody died in there and they haven't hired a new person, and somebody is just kind of doing it as a part-time job. Instead of making anything new, they're taking whatever else they already had and changing it up a bit. So now we have discussed event quests and the calendars. Same kind of goes for offers, or the general feel of the game definitely has been that half of the staff has been laid off or producing MROC, you can take a pick, and nobody wants to do anything new, nobody wants to take any risks, nobody wants to invent anything. And in the same course, like, they have rehashed Alliance Quest, definitely cool thing. Alliance Quest Map 7 is changing, they are keeping it quite a bit more interesting, I can get behind that. It's kind of evolving on the same base ground. At the same time, Alliance Wars have never felt more stale and stagnant. There is a new map to them, rewards are definitely not as enticing as they used to be, and the whole format of it is definitely seemingly old and people are over it, and many more people don't really care about Alliance War Seasons, for instance, anymore. And I think it's time to replace them. I think it's time to do something completely new. Maybe instead of doing Alliance War Seasons, we can do tournaments every month where people just run their regular Alliance Wars in the background, and at the beginning of the month you get enlisted in the tournament. Throughout the month you participate. As soon as you get kicked out, you can run your Alliance Wars as normal, and then a winner or top positions of tournament gets something. There are many different ideas they could test, there are many different ideas they could explore. They're either too chicken shit covered, or just don't care enough, or there are no ideas coming out of them. So I don't know, but definitely feel like the most stagnant year, and there definitely has been a lack of kind of innovative changes to the game. Even the whole progression-based calendar, next progression level is Cavalier now, right? It's still the same kind of like rehash step up from Uncollected, and again, there's nothing kind of fresh, nothing that kind of like comes as wow. They had the first community-wide event, which is kind of a cool idea, but an absolute flop and disaster. So I guess you can give them that, but in my opinion, hardly counts, because in essence, it really didn't give you anything at all worth fighting for. And yeah, I don't know, man. There are so many things they could have done, like some alliance-based arenas, like alliance war tournament ideas, rehash of dungeons, some individual, I don't know, dungeon type runs to see who gets further. There are a lot of things anybody can come up with to make the game interesting. They came up with zip, zero, zilch, nada, and they're getting paid to do so, so that's definitely disappointing. And have to definitely kind of hope that they pick up the pace and they get a bit more creative, they get a bit more wild, they are not afraid to shake some things up a bit, because it currently definitely seems that they have this mold where the game fits in and they are not comfortable stepping out of it. So I hope that for the sake of game's future, they actually start giving a shit and make up some interesting stuff for us to do, because we would absolutely love that. Maybe not everything, but eventually they definitely hit a jackpot with something. Okay, now another thing is a Dungeons fail. Now Dungeons is not this year's idea, but the fail of making them relevant. Having dungeon days was cool and fun and kind of reinvigorated a bit, but then they took them away in order to be able to present them as a prize for this community-wide event or something. But other than that, the dungeons, even though there is a lot of potential hidden up there, and when they initially came to the game, I could have definitely hoped that dungeons will essentially provide you with an alternative option of, let's say, acquiring new champions, where arena would be a place where you got to grind, mindlessly grind, beat up weak champions, do whatever, spend 3 days of your life. Or you could play dungeons, let's say, and sweat and play and stress that for a day in comparison. But if you are skilled in dungeons, you would be able to acquire the same result as people acquire in arenas, therefore obtaining, I don't know, battle chips, units, new champions, something like that. And I think that could have potentially been a massive game mode as a solo or dual kind of like player game mode. But there's a lot more that can be done with the dungeons, and their kind of half-assed attitude and direction with them is definitely extremely saddening, because all in all, to a degree, I like playing dungeons. I like playing dungeons with you guys, or I like sometimes trying to push the high room or something. At the same time, when it comes to reward for effort, it's absolutely the worst piece of content you can spend your time in, because it's absolutely not worth it. It's garbage, it's rubbish, and if you are a pragmatic player that likes to receive X amount of reward for X amount of time spent in a game, dungeons is the first place where you have to stay away, because it's simply not worth playing the game mode, because it offers you absolutely nothing in comparison to arena quests or what have you. Therefore, yeah, dungeons revamp is a huge must in the near future in the game. And another sad bit is Summoner Sigil. To a degree, I almost marked it down as a win, because to a degree it did bring quite few new things to the game, and I do like it. I think the Black ISO market, for instance, is fantastic, not necessarily in the Sigil. I wished that these things would have been free, but you can kind of understand where the Sigil thing is going from. But I'm still absolutely pissed off that they are hiding quality of life changes in Summoner of Sigil, stuff that they would have done or should do in 2017 or have done in 2017 and 18 before that. They for free, now they put under a paywall and we have to pay for it. And by these quality of life changes like faster energy refreshes, or I don't know, more gold, or whatever else have you, bigger inventory and things like that, and who knows where this is going to expand to. And I'm actually quite a bit afraid, because this is sooner or later going to become a must for an endgame player, because it seems that they definitely have plans of growing out some of their Sigil, perhaps increasing its price, and there's gonna be something happening with this for sure. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, whichever dickhead thought that it is a great idea to give quality of life changes in a paywall definitely didn't realize how many people it would actually piss off. The fact that we have been asking for more gold, or for quicker energy refreshes, or for more storage for 3 years, they have completely ignored us. Well, they didn't ignore us, they listened us, they knew the things that we want to see in the Sigil, and then they sold them to us instead of kind of upgrading the game and moving on with the times. So it almost seems that, I don't know, next time they increase the level cap, it's only going to be exclusive for Summoner Sigil players, or something of the sort. It definitely doesn't feel good. Can understand where they're going with, and there are definitely items that they can put in Summoner Sigil, and there's stuff that they can do with it. But taking quality of life basic ideas and putting it under a paywall is definitely a dirty tactic, and I'm not in support of it. Therefore, I'm not exactly against Summer Sigil as such. It's no different than having a unit card that we had already for like half a year before, which is worth it. But the sad fact that the simple things that everybody should have access to is now put under paywall, I definitely disagree with. And Summoner Sigil is a huge kind of like problem area in my opinion. And now that we have covered the dungeons, now we can talk a bit about a few specific events. We had overall fairly decent kind of like good flow of content coming, and that is arguably one of also the wins that I hesitantly didn't end up giving to Kabam, is that almost every month we had some big piece of content dropping off. So this year we have had 3 variants, and we have had 3 chapters of Act 6 come out, so that's covers 6 months, plus we had some other side event stuff. So definitely see for the latter part, almost every kind of like other month we had a big piece of content drop that actually draws our attention, draws our time, and they have definitely kept us busy. At the same time, stuff like Avengers Endgame event, I don't know who dropped the ball, but they switched off the lights and went for holiday before they released anything, because it was nothing, it was boring, it was arguably the kind of like most dull time in the game, despite of how huge it was for Marvel Universe, Marvel brand in general. The month of Endgame was completely rubbish. And then again, October was completely dull, dim, boring again, when people were kind of like looking at their feet, wiggling their fingers with nothing to do, because there was literally nothing interesting coming in the content. And that is quite sad, especially with the fact that these monthly side events that I already mentioned have been extremely dull and boring, and rehash of everything that we used to have, and they had even taken a turn of being more and more grind intensive, and all of these boring events that we had played through several times before in the past, where we have to do X amount of fights every day or every 8 hours to get a small bit of reward and whatever, and they just seemed so time intensive and so boring, because it felt like a grind to grind. Therefore, again, one of my biggest kind of hopes for the next year is complete revamp of the idea they approach these side events, make them fun, make them new, have a bit of wild ideas. Some of them will fail, some of them will work, but God forbid, I do not want any single event again where you have to do 6 fights every day or 7 fights every day. That week on week format, first of all, is much better in my opinion. Second of all, they can do many things different and come up with something new, rather than force us do that boring crap throughout the year, all year, man. It was so annoying. It felt kind of like grinding arena without grinding arena. I don't know, man. There's definitely many things that are going wrong there. Either way, moving on to that, the couple of biggest points. Again, Act 6 is arguably the biggest failure, however, of 2019 in my opinion. And to be fair, 6.1 in large, it probably was a success. Now, the problem with 6.1 is definitely the controversial 4-star ban, which I still disagree with. I still think was not ill-advised. I think it was cheap. Cheap in a sense that it was clearly done to force people to spend more. There's no reason why maxed out 4 stars can't be taken in if you can take in a rank 1 5-star. It's not to protect us, it's not to help us, it's not to check if we're tall enough or whatever kind of bullshit they are saying. It's simple fact that 5-star and 6-star champions have higher price tag, that they are newer champions, they're harder to acquire, therefore you're less likely to have all of the pieces that you need to kind of do that content smoothly. And that's to take away your ability to bring in 4-star Void or 4-star Wasp for Ghost Synergy, or whatever else you might need in order to counter these pieces of content. So that's a cunt move, that's a cunt thing that they did. They're absolute bitches for doing it. Whether they're going to admit it or not, they can go and fuck themselves for doing that. I'm very sorry, but that's genuinely inexcusable thing that nobody, whoever has had a civil conversation with me, could have possibly been able to justify or rectify without some bullshit excuse that it's for you, it's to make sure your account is big enough. No, it fucking isn't. It's for you to make sure that I spend my money to get that champion as a 5-star, even though I have it already as a 4-star and ranked up. So therefore, tough shit. You guys suck for doing it. They suck infinite amount of balls, and that is also first time in the game's history then they put a price tag on champions value and kind of requirement like that. Before that we had a requirement of class, but you could understand that because you could still bring in any rarity, and the content was designed specifically for those classes. Now this content was getting more and more narrow, and 6.1 was fine. With 6.1 there were only like 2 or 3 or 4 maybe fights or lanes where you had such a really specific needs. 6.15 crossbones obviously is one of those where you need a big strong hitting bleed immune. Then you had Symbiote Supremon buffed up, and then you had Caustic Temper lane basically, and that was more or less about it. Other than that you could kind of get through, you could kind of get by, and you'd be fine, and the content didn't feel as horrible as it could have possibly felt if they had pushed a bit harder with the lanes. Again, the cunts for banning the 4-stars though. And 6.1 is a relatively simple piece of content, especially when putting next to 6.2 and 3. And 6.1 and giving away the Cavalier title in 6.1 also obviously pushed many people playing, and that is exactly when many people's progression level have kind of stopped, because the utter piece of rubbish that is 6.2 and 6.3, okay, 6.3 is arguably a bit better, but 6.2 is complete cesspool of scum and I don't know, cunts combined, and that is what the offspring would be then. If you take the biggest cunt and the biggest asshole and scumming person on the planet, make them mate, produce an offspring, that is a piece of content that offspring would design, because it is so cheap, it's so underhanded, and it's by far has destroyed the will and willingness of so many people to even care about Endgame, to even care about Act 6. It's by far the worst thing Kabam could have done to themselves by letting that piece of content stand. Now, in addition here to the 4-star ban, we have these class gates, which ranged from requirement of 2 champions to 4 champions, and 4 champions is 80% of your roster, or in other words, you were allowed to bring in 1 champion that you actually wanted, and 4 champions that you had to bring, which might have sucked based on your roster size. And that made the whole quest completely different. The quest, again, had its positives. So, first of all, let's just finish off in 6.1. 6.1, aside the bitch-ass move of banning the 4-stars, 6.1 was alright. Couple of bad fights, nothing too tragic, nothing too longer, excessive, no huge health pulls. 6.2 was complete light and day. Now, 6.2 had some really fun global nodes, I can give them that, definitely. Whoever designed global nodes was the only person with a piece of brain in that entire project, in my opinion, because those are fun. Those are cool, the Icarus, the life cycle, whatever. Some of them are annoying, some of them are flat out fun, some of them are helpful. 6 to 5 node was really hard, but still challenging and kind of alright. And in itself, it isn't really detrimental or distractive. It's only when combined with these really ridiculous path fights where you had to have insane amount of roster reach, basically. You had to have every answer for a very specific potential problem, and you had to have it ranked up as a 5 or 6-star. And that's insane. It was the first piece of content ever where I felt my roster was definitely lacking several of the key players. And to put in comparison, my roster is one of the 100th largest accounts in the game, so that's just silly. And yeah, the 6.2 gates lanes in themselves absolutely destroyed the player base. Player base was not ready for it, player base still not ready for it, and just because of how badly players got their ass handed to them in 6.2, they largely leave their content alone and they don't even particularly care about 6.3 even, because what's the point if you can't even complete 6.2? So even though when Act 6 will conclude, if you're not able to get past 6.2 ridiculous gate requirements, you're not going to be able to receive the total prize which is being dangled in front of our face. And that is a major problem. I definitely think they should revisit that piece of content. I think they should reduce the gate requirements. I think they should maybe ease up a couple of fights there, send out a compensation to all of the people who have already explored it, and let all of the kind of upcoming players who are aspiring to kind of close the gap in between endgame players actually go and beat that piece of content. Also, I do believe that 4-star bans should get uplifted. Now, all of that cesspool of shit and misery already kind of covered in 6.2, we do have to talk about the overall sense of cheapness and just nasty childlike spite in there on some of the nodes, like, I don't know, do you bleed rogue? Like, who the hell does that? Why the hell? It just felt literally somebody spitting you in the face and making fun of you. That entire content kind of reeks cheap. Strength in numbers node on Mordo. Basically, it means if you have made any mistake along the way to the boss on the arguably the hardest quest in the game produced till date, you have to pay up to revive all of your fallen heroes. So basically 100 unit revive just to be able to fight the boss normally, and that's a cunt move if I have ever seen one. That definitely is a stupid ill design that basically does nothing aside from forces us to pay and get pissed off at Kabam and any self-respecting company with some sort of vision how to treat their players would never even think about doing something stupid like that. You can have a fight like that in the middle of the path or somewhere, fair enough. But for the final boss, man, it just literally felt like a toll gate that we had to pay up whenever we entered there. So that was a bitch-ass move. And then, obviously, we do have famous 6.22 Sinister, where there are maybe a couple of champions in this entire game who can currently solo the boss. At the time it came out, there was Captain Marvel movie who could solo him if you had like all of the boosts active and if you played really well. Other than that, that fight was pretty much not soloable by any single one hero without Heimdall synergy. And again, providing that necessity of having 5 or 6-star Heimdall and Angela or Hela is crazy cheap and stupid. It still is a roadblock for many people half a year later, because it's an RNG based game where you do have to hope to get lucky to acquire a very specific champion in order to be able to clear the content, and it's just plain wrong. It just should not happen that way. And obviously ever since we have had Warlock, maybe a couple more options for that fight, but the fact itself that you can pretty much never solo the fight and you're going to be forced to pay up unless you have some very specific full counters is really underhanded, and that caused a huge outrage, and rightfully so, because that was probably the first time we saw such a rubbish boss design, and that wasn't even the final boss. The final boss, 626 champion, is a whole entire different conversation in itself, and that was the first time in the game's history, even if you prepare perfectly, even if you have the perfect roster and unlimited amount of units, if you do not have the natural gifted ability to play well enough, you can go and fist yourself in a corner because you're not going to be getting through it. The simple fact is that that fight essentially is pass-fail basis, whether you as a player are good enough. Obviously, it's still extremely roster demanded, which is not a good thing, which is complete opposite what I gave them praise about the Thanos fight. It's completely opposite type of fight where you have to have a perfect answer. If you do have to have a perfect answer, the fight's going to be relatively simple. If you don't, you can have a relatively okay kind of answer, but the fight's going to be a nightmare. Or if you don't have any of that, you're just going to be stuck. And then, even if you do have a perfect answer, and when you do get to the last 10% of the champion boss, you're still greeted with these 5 indestructible charges, and your progress does not carry through from fight to fight. So it means whether you can do it 5 times in a row or you can't. To put in comparison, in basketball, if you would be asked to shoot 5 3-pointers in a row, that's the only way you can pass. It's not whether you shoot 5 or 10 3-pointers in total in like a training session, but you have to do them successfully in a row. If you're not skilled enough to do that, the odds of that are virtually impossible. You'd have to get extremely lucky. You could potentially sit there for 4 days, try it, and it's never going to happen because your progress does not get carried over from session to session. They could have easily made it so that there are 10 indestructible charges, you get them off even one by one every time you die, and then eventually you get to pass. Now, champion boss in itself, again, is another huge roadblock where many people are stuck behind today, and is another reason why people just don't give a rat's furry bottom line for Act 6 anymore, because it has destroyed the fun aspect of it. And yes, you can make an argument that you have to go and practice and you have to be good enough. And yes, that sure enough is the case. But this is the first fight ever when even with the perfect roster, X amount of unlimited units, if you do not physically have the gift of the timing or whatever, you're not going to pass that ever. And there are many people like that who play this game semi-casually, spend some money on the game, typically rely on revives or a great champion to beat content, even though they're gonna die a couple of times. Now, this entire kind of like subset group of players are stuck because Kabam thinks everybody should be playing like a legend. I don't know, and it's definite shift in the way Kabam has been building the fights, has been making the nodes, and is getting more and more dire, more and more desperate, more and more nasty, and more, I don't know, underhanded and cheap. It's almost to the point where I'm kind of wondering whether it's worth to even bother and try and do the new content, because it's just stupid at this point. All of the new node design as well this year has been horrible. Some of the nodes have been fun, but all of these caustic temper, pleasure to burn, or do you bleed, and all that stuff is just very, very bad node design where you are being forced into an extremely small subset of champions. And that is again extremely worrying, especially when you combine it with the only 5 and 6 star champions required, plus, I don't know, the health pools or whatever with 6.3. And again, so 6.2 is definitely the biggest fail of 2019 in my opinion. Act 6 in itself is a fail, and 6.2 is a crown jewel in the smoking, steaming pile shit top of Act 6. 6.3 came out, it's relatively better, but again, it's designed very specifically, and the biggest kind of critique about 6.3 that I do have is that the fact that the health pulse and champion attack are much larger than they had any right to be. The content's clearly designed for a rank 3 6-star champions at a time when there is pretty much no access to rank 3 6-star champions, let alone any access to rank 3 6-star champions if you're not an endgame player. Therefore, it's a quite filthy piece of content. All in all, it is not as bad as 6.2, but then again, hardly anything can be, and it's also fairly specific, and there are some mind-boggling fights like the Acid Wash Mysterio, where you realistically have one champion that can fit the requirements of the game, which is Man-Thing, which is also a new and fairly specific requirement of having armor break and ability to inflict poison on an opponent, and that is just ridiculous. Again, it just completely lacks either a lack of respect for the player base or a lack of, I don't know, intelligence or knowledge about their own game that they are designing, because nobody willingly should be morally able to design that kind of piece of content and that kind of fight. So the question is, either you're taking a piss of your player base, or you are essentially not knowing what you're doing and how large and shit piece of content you have designed, because there is no reasonable excuse on producing a fight in the endgame piece of content where only one champion is a good answer for it. So if you think otherwise, you can go and fuck yourself. And that being said, we are nearly done with Act 6, and the whole rebalance thing is the last thing that I wanted to mention. It's another extremely big kind of painful piece that we do have to talk about, which definitely does cause a lot of unrest in between players, and it went really badly with the announcement of Cull, because Cull was arguably at the point one of the more expensive and hyped champions of the game, and people were outraged, and they still are. And then in order to reduce the outrage, they kind of like changed the idea how they're going to be doing it. It's still up in there. It's like half a year later, nothing is clear, and it's just horrible. I mean, that's a very, very bad way to approach the situation. We're still stuck in limbo, and it's not even with the whole rebalance thing, it's also with like the bug champions. Like, we have had this Vision Arcus bug in game for several months, and it hasn't been properly mentioned even. So now, for instance, I have him as a 6-star. Can I rank him? Can I not rank him? And this kind of like doubt, the creeping disbelief of the fact that your champion is going to remain the way he is, or the fear that you're going to make a rank up decision that's going to get nerfed and it's going to ruin kind of like your experience with it. That's very real and present today in MCOC, and Kabam definitely has to do something. They have to be much more open. They have to update us with many more details, and they either need to completely scrap this idea, because let's face it, for 4.5 years they were perfectly fine without saying that they need to revisit each champion after X time it was released. It's only in the last 6 months. So Was it really needed is a question that needs to be asked. Additionally, if it is really needed, then there definitely needs to be more work, more communication, more information passed from one side to another to ensure that nobody feels cheated, because at this point, if anybody touches a single hair on a champion that I had spent, I don't know, £1,000 trying to acquire and make it worse than what I paid for, you feel cheated. In the case of Neymar, now everybody's panicking about upcoming Neymar changes because Neymar's high prestige champion, his high value target. So many people spent so much for him for prestige and his ability, and he's arguably probably one of the champions that gave them the most money. Now, even if they decrease the attack by 1, technically it's not the product that they paid for, and they can go fuck themselves and give me my money back. But obviously they won't. Therefore, I'm gonna be forced to fuck myself because Kabam fucked me, and that has to be manifested somehow, right? No, that doesn't really work out, and they really need to do better. They need to talk to us better. They need to give us assurances. For instance, these champion revisitations ideally would be simply limited to positive changes. Simple as that. If they said that, any champion that we revisit will not get anything ever taken away from them, but simply upgraded if they are underperforming. That's all they would have to do. If there would be some huge thing for X champion once a year or something like that, then they could change that differently and completely separate from this whole rebalancing thing, right? And then that would be like an individual case that we could approach. But if they would simply come up with a simple line that these minor rebalancing changes will only affect champions positively, if there will be a champion in game that is definitely overperforming, we will notify you in timely manner and discuss a proper plan of action. That would be much more logical thing to do and would put everybody at rest and everybody at ease. But currently you do not feel like you can rank up anything without there being potential risk for that champion to be changed or performing differently within a short period of time afterwards. And that has pretty much been 2019. Now this has been a quite long video, but that was intentionally so. Now after this video, either later today or tomorrow, I'm going to be recording a video about the things that I would like to see in 2020. So that's going to be a fairly interesting piece of discussion as well, in my opinion. But now my mouth is absolutely dry. I have mumbled upon for far too long. Hope you guys have enjoyed today's video, rant / whatever it was, looking back at 2019. And with that all being said, if you did find some of the information useful or some of my go fuck yourself jokes funny, then hit that sub button, hit that like button, hit all of the buttons. And yeah, I'm gonna catch you guys soon. See ya.